If your house is anything like mine this month, there is a countdown on until next Friday when Hamilton will air on TV for the first time. This musical, which is set to air on the anniversary of our independence, is an audacious reimagining of our national story. It not only reminds us of the deep idealism and fatal flaws of our founding fathers, but through its casting of people of color in the principal roles and the use of modern hip hop, it allows us to imagine that our nation really was created for everyone. Perhaps because I'm a rabbi, I've had this line from Hamilton running through my head in a loop for weeks. The character of Hamilton, imagining the freedom that will be won by the American Revolution, sings, "Foes oppose us, we take an honest stand. We roll like Moses, claiming our promised land." But of course, as we learn in this week's Torah portion, Moses doesn't actually get to claim the promised land. Instead, he learns that he, along with nearly all of the Israelites who followed him out of Egypt, will die in the wilderness. Rabbi Jan Katsu describes this portion in which we witness the deaths of both Miriam and Aaron as a pivot point, a transition from the generation that experienced negative liberty, freedom from Egyptian slavery, to the generation that would experience positive liberty, freedom to worship God in the land of promise. The transition he describes is one between freedom from oppression and freedom to thrive and to enjoy the bounty of the promised land. What kind of courage does it take to not only imagine a better world for yourself and your community, but to make that a reality? How did a generation born in the wilderness reimagine themselves as a free and thriving people? Earlier this summer, we read as Moses sent scouts to survey the promised land. Caleb and Joshua returned with a vision of promise and abundance and really giant grapes. In the face of the voices that were warning against the dangers that lay ahead, Joshua and Caleb insisted, "The land that we traversed and scouted is an exceedingly good land. If God is pleased with us, God will bring us into that land, a land that flows with milk and honey, and give it to us." They had a vision and the hope to claim the bounty that awaited them rather than succumbing to the fear of what it would take to win it. Claiming a promised land, a vision for a better future for your people, is an act of existential courage. And we have seen that courage play out several times in American history. In 1904, the Black scholar and activist W.E.B. Du Bois wrote, "I believe in liberty for all men, the space to stretch their arms and their souls, the right to breathe and the right to vote, the freedom to choose their friends, enjoy the sunshine, and ride the railroads uncursed by color, thinking, dreaming, working as they will in a kingdom of God and love." This was in 1904. And yet Du Bois already knew what his promised land would look like. One can only imagine that his clear vision of a world redeemed fueled his ability to help the facts on the ground slowly conform to that ideal. On this Pride Shabbat, we also remember the revolutionary leadership of the LGBTQ movement. Last year, we marked 50 years since the Stonewall Uprising, when gay and transgender New Yorkers rose up against the violence and discrimination they faced at the hands of the police. And this year, we mark 50 years since the first Pride March. So if you think about that, in the span of 1 year, gay, lesbian, and transgender Americans went from declaring their freedom from oppression to declaring their freedom to live bold, beautiful, public lives. The flyer that announced the first Pride March in New York said, "What it will all come to, no one can tell. It is our hope that the day will come when homosexuals will be an integral part of society, being treated as human beings." I'm going to repeat that. What it will all come to, no one can tell. The promised land is scary. But they continue, "It is our hope that the day will come when homosexuals will be an integral part of society, being treated as human beings." Our LGBTQ forebears did not wait for society to change. At the time of that first march, it was still illegal for two people of the same gender to dance with one another in New York. Instead, as Michael Brown, one of the founders of the Gay Liberation Front, said, "We have to come out in the open and stop being ashamed, or else people will go on treating us as freaks. This march is an affirmation and declaration of our new pride." Hope and pride have been the hallmarks of the struggle for LGBTQ rights in this country. Do you remember the jubilation of those first couples who got married on the steps of the courthouse in Boston? Their abounding love and joy and hope and pride did just as much to revolutionize America's understanding of what it means for all people to be created equal as the lawsuits that won them that right. And by the time the Supreme Court ruled this month that the Civil Rights Act prohibits employment discrimination against gay and transgender people, large majorities of Americans had already come to see what the organizers of that first Pride March hoped: that LGBTQ people are an integral part of society and must be treated as human beings. To be sure, the fight for freedom from oppression has not been fully won. Just weeks ago, the government issued a new rule allowing for discrimination against transgender people in medical care and insurance. And trans women of color in particular face continued violence, which we cannot ignore. But in my lifetime, I have seen a revolution in how LGBTQ and non-binary people are able to live their lives with love and hope. It has been miraculous to see LGBTQ folks claim their promised land, even as we continue to struggle to live up to our national promise. As we continue to roll like Moses toward an America that is worthy of the self-evident truths on which it is founded, let us remember this lesson: that freedom from is not enough, that our promise lies not just in the lifting of the bonds of oppression, but in the flourishing of human potential, which begins with a radical and courageous vision for change. Let us dream big. Let us not rest until audacious, full-hearted, joyous, prideful liberty rings from the rooftops of our great nation, accessible to all who are bold enough to claim it.